So we have, I don't know if you can signal, is this good? All right, people at home are happy? All right. We have, this won't be one of those sermons you look up in years to come, I'm sure. It's not going to be one of those ones you reference, like, you know, you're like, remember that sermon. But I wanted to share with you something. And when I get into a place of feeling disheartened or overwhelmed, I often return to Joshua, like the Old Testament. I get into Genesis and I kind of skip over Leviticus and Numbers, and I go to Joshua because I just love the history of it. And I love the way Joshua starts, right? And you can all probably feel that. Right, where Joshua is just like, oh my goodness. Suddenly, I'm in charge of not just like a small church or 20 people or 100 kids. Like, we're talking hundreds of thousands, like an entire nation. And he's kind of stood on the sideline. And God shows up to him, this is amazing, and says, have courage and be strong in me and lead boldly. I feel like, and maybe you can feel this too, in even just the journey of the last couple weeks of scrambling and trying to care for a pastor who you've got to care for you, and now you're suddenly caring for them, and you scramble, and you're like, how do we manage in all this darkness? We thought we were coming through this. We thought we were coming through COVID, and I was supposed to shine like a light. And suddenly, like, you know, that light was breaking through everywhere, and everything's shutting down again, and everything's going sideways again. And it can feel so much like I'm really trying to shine my light here, God, but you keep putting it under a basket. And it's not me, it's you. It's out of my control. And maybe you're feeling today like you are done with COVID tide. You know what I mean? Like we've just come through Christmas tide where, you know, like the Christmas music starts in October and it's really exciting. And you get through November and you put your lights up, and by December 25th or 26th, you're like, okay, can we just shut off the Christmas music? Put the tree away. I'll see you in maybe June when I miss Christmas again. And I kind of feel that way with COVID. I thought we had put this all away and we were going to move on. Or maybe you're feeling that way, just mentally tired, like, we're back online again, or I'm working remotely again, or I'm on Zoom again. You kind of feel what's next. So today I want you to look with me. I've picked 4 M's to try and help myself think through this. But how do we manage muddy feet? How do we enjoy a miraculous journey? Where do we find mighty strength? And how do we move the kingdom? So let's get muddy. Let's look for miracles. Let's find some might. And let's move. I love this passage in Joshua, and I'm going to go back into it here. And would you read it with me again if you want? When the people set out from their tents to cross over the Jordan, the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant were in front of the people. Now the Jordan overflows its banks throughout the time of harvest. So when those who bore the ark had come to the Jordan, and it flows over its banks throughout the time of the harvest. So when those who bore the ark had come to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were dipped in the edge of the waters flowing from above stood still, and the flowing towards the sea of the Dead Sea were cut off wholly. I just skipped all those crazy names. Then the people crossed over opposite Jericho. Now while all Israel were crossing over on dry ground, the priests who bore the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stood on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan until the entire nation finished crossing the Jordan. So we started off with a passage in Ephesians 6. And I thought when I first was asked to come and speak, I'm going to talk about spiritual warfare, because again, feeling in that dark spot where I feel like we're in this place of spiritual warfare, where we need to put on God's breastplate, God's righteousness, our feet just need to be in peace, and we need to have truth buckled around us constantly. But I started reading through Ephesians, and I read through Ephesians quite a few times in the last week, just preparing for today, and I realized that Paul's message is to a people on a move, to a people that were being moved forward. They weren't a static people, the Ephesians. They were coming from darkness into light. They were people that were sinners. They were living in this metropolis, this center of the Roman world. They were considered to be a Roman city, just like on equal par with Rome itself, just across the Mediterranean. It was a really important hub. And these people were being called to take the power of Christ, to be seen as ambassadors, to be different from the people around them, and to move forward. And I thought, wow, that resonates to me when I'm going back through Joshua about a people on a move. They're being called forward into enemy territory to be light in darkness, to be representatives of another way. And I'm like, that's us. That is totally us. We are crossing over, so the Israelites in today's story are crossing the Jordan over right in front of Jericho. Like, this is the epitome of the enemy, right? The massive walls. And I read Ephesians, and I'm like, I need to be encouraged here, God. And he's like, sure you are. But you're going to be in a fight. And you're light in darkness. And even though you feel like your light's under a bushel basket, it's not. It's still shining. Here's a funny story from when I was younger. There was this, I don't know if this relates, just bear with me. But it's the whole idea of how a light in darkness becomes brighter and brighter. There was this haunted house kind of place. You know, in Niagara Falls, there's all these wax museums and different places you can go into, and they take tons of your money. And there was one that we dared each other. It said, you know, you can't make it through. It was, I don't know what it was called, something like Your Wildest Nightmare or someplace like that. And I'm not into scary things. So, like, the idea of being on heights up a ladder like 6 feet terrifies me. So we went into this thing. And you walk in, and it's pitch black. And they say, follow the light. Now, here's a fantastic thing. I'm colorblind. There's a little red light up in the middle of nowhere. So it takes me a moment to even find the light. But when it's so dark, it's pitch black. Everything's painted black. The lights are all off. The people that are in there that are terrifying you are wearing night vision goggles, right? Like, it's pitch black, and all you have is your eyes. Suddenly, that little red light out there shines like a beacon, and you head towards it. And it was just, for me, that's always remained as this idea of being a light in darkness. It doesn't matter if it's a little night light in a dark house. It's a pilot light in your furnace. It's hope. They're in a dark house when everything else is going off and you see that little light. It's amazing how bright it is. Last night, did you notice how bright the moon was? It was like daylight outside after having cloud cover. And then the moon comes through and it just lights up everything like daylight. And it's like, it's not a bright light, but man, it gives so much light to the darkness. I feel like that's where we're called. We're called to be a light in darkness. And we're called into a promised land, across from an enemy city, to be ambassadors, to represent Christ, to be that power. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to start off with muddy feet. See, the people, when they went to cross over, the priests led the way. The Jordan was overflowing at its banks, in verse 15, throughout the time of the harvest. So when those who bore the ark had come to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were dipped in the edge of the water. We are a holy priesthood. It says in 1 Peter that somehow we've moved from just being citizens of darkness, absent from Christ, to becoming, in Ephesians 2, it says that we've already been seated in heaven with him. That we've been moved from being strangers to God in Ephesians 2, it says we were strangers, we were in darkness, we lived in lives of sin, and now through grace, we've been made light, we've been made friends, we've actually been given seats in heaven already. We're the priests of today, you and I. But we have to have muddy feet. We need to move forward first and step into the water. We think of these miracles, like I even think of the Red Sea. My wife and I were talking about it last night. Like Moses leading the people through the Red Sea, that did not happen like in the movies where it takes like a 2-minute out scene. Like, oh, they walk into the one side and they're coming out the other side. There's hundreds of thousands of people. Joshua goes on to say that there were more than 40,000 armed men that moved over the Jordan at that time. That doesn't just happen quickly. But it requires us to step into the mud first, to get our feet wet so that the miracle can happen. Are we ready to move and get a little dirty, to see something change? We're being called home. The promised land is across the other side. We can see the enemy city that sits on the edge of that promised land, but it's our land. It's our home. Are we moving towards it? It says that it was in flood. So it's a little bit out of control. We've watched the little river that runs through Drayton here and into Conestoga. I guess it's a reservoir. Sometimes it looks like a algae lake, but we've seen it in flood, and we've seen how it can just get out of control so quickly. Could you imagine walking towards something so out of control and having to step into the edges of that? And you know you're going to get a little wet and muddy, but this is the way God wants us to move. Also, the water stops flowing upstream first. It doesn't say it immediately moved away from those priests like we see in the movies where they take a step and the water walks away. You know, in Moana, where she starts to toddle into the water and the water moves away from her and it draws her in, and suddenly she's walking and you can see the banks and the starfish on either side, and it's like, wow, that's cool, I want that. Maybe that's what's happening here. It says, no, the water stopped flowing upstream first. So that's going to take a while for it to dry out. Are we ready to walk into this situation that maybe is out of control because God's calling us forward? Are we not just getting muddy, but like there's so much we don't control. And it's such a lie for us that we think we can control so much of the things that we see around us. And it's what adds to our stress and anxiety, right? And yet there's so much that we don't control every day. We just have to step into the flood to allow the miraculous journey, which is the second point. In verse 16 of Joshua, it says, the waters flowing from up above stood still, rising in a single heap. Could you imagine if you lived at Adam and suddenly like the water just started piling up like a snowbank, and then what? In a massive heap. And while that was flowing, all the water that was flowing to the Arabah, the Dead Sea, were cut off wholly. And then the people crossed over opposite Jericho. When we, as the priests of God, move forward, and they move forward with the ark of God, they're moving forward with God's presence, right? We're back into Ephesians here, where we are the people of God and his presence indwells us. And we're putting on his armor, his righteousness. It's not ours. His truth, not ours. Not my truth, not your truth. God's truth is what's belted around us. When we move forward with the peace that comes from the gospel, when we do it with the Spirit and the Word of God as our sword, which is our defense, and our faith that is our shield, and our salvation that protects our mind. When we move forward that way, with God in and surrounding us, the ark of the presence in the middle as we step forward, we see this miracle take place. It's probably not the way we would picture it. It's not that Moana moment where the water separates and we're called. We may not even know our name, right? Moana's yelling out, "I am Moana." Nice job, Moana. Good on you. At least you know who you are. Half the time I don't know who I am. And I'm not always sure what my purpose is, especially when it changes from week to week at this moment of my life. It's like this flood, this harvest flood that I'm stepping into. But God's calling on us this miraculous journey because we don't understand our salvation half the time. It would blow our minds. So how do we move forward into this journey? Follow God's presence. Allow His direction to be centered to you and to be the voice that's carrying you forward. Can you imagine being the people watching this on the outside? The people watching the priests, the neighbors down the street, and the people at the other church across the road watching us as we lead forward. And they're like, "Wow, I don't know. I'm not sure that that's really God's message to me. Thank you. You go for it. I'll be praying for you from over here where it's safe." How do we move forward and step into that flood? It seems to be that God is calling them to walk towards their enemy. Move over and cross the Jordan in front of Jericho. So this is a challenge to me this week as I've been preparing this. Am I moving towards my enemy? Am I moving with truth and grace and the gospel? Am I stepping into the chaos to see if I can find them? I don't know. I just pray that God's speaking to you through this because I see how He's talked to me in this. And we go with the gospel. It's amazing. We just don't know what God's going to do next. It's a miraculous journey. I notice here that the next point I have here is that the mighty strength to do this is not our own. And that's not mentioned here so much in this passage that we have in Joshua, but it is mentioned in our Ephesians passion. When you look at Ephesians 6, if I can find it here, it's in the New Testament. Verse 10 and 11. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of His power. That just echoes to me what He says to Joshua when he meets him. Take courage and be strong. Lead my people. Finally, and that word finally, right, in chapter 6, means like, in light of everything I've already said, in light of that you are now with Christ, in light of the fact that you've been saved from darkness and it's by grace and not from yourself, it is a gift from God, in light of the fact that you are now ambassadors and you shine as light in darkness, in light of the fact that you're called to live holy and pure in chapters 4 and 5, to live differently from the people that live around you so that they can see there's something different inside of you. Finally, after you've figured out how to live in harmony with your wife and your children, with your husband and your neighbor, with your slave and your master, right? Finally, in trying to live the right way at home and the right way at work, finally, be strong. Be strong in the Lord and in the strength of His power. I can't do this. I can't love my wife properly or my kids half the time, right? Maybe I'm being too vulnerable here. I can't always do the right thing at work, but I try really hard. I don't always relate to my boss the right way, but I try. I don't always live as light for my neighbors, but finally, be strong in the Lord and do this in His power. Put on the whole armor of God so that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For our struggle is not against the enemies of blood and flesh, but against the rulers and authorities, the cosmic powers, the present darkness, against spiritual forces in heavenly places. I don't think he's laying out a hierarchy. He's just saying, like, you're not my enemy. It's really not you and me. It's really not them and us. There's something else going on here. There's other authorities. There's other things at play. So take up the armor so that you may be able to withstand, and when you've done everything, to stand firm. Stand. Stand. Take a stand. Like those priests in the middle of the river, standing while all of Israel walks by them. They're just standing there. But it's so cool to watch them do that and stand there. Like crazy that they stepped into the water in the first place, right? You know, my robes are going to get wet, my sandals are going to be ruined, and they're brand new. No, they just go into it. And they got the ark on their shoulders, and they walk forward, and they get to the middle of the river, and they just stand there. You know, with this weight on their shoulders that they're holding. And that weight is the presence of God. And everybody gets to walk through right in front of God. That's not going to be like a 5-minute walk. Have you ever had to hold something for 5 minutes? Just hold it. Or 10 minutes, or half an hour. Can you imagine holding it while all of Waterloo walks by you, just standing there in the middle of a river? Because God asked you to do it? And at some point, you must be thinking to yourself, I have got to be crazy. Or I just desperately need a drink of water. Or when is the bathroom break? And they stand there before the people in the middle of the river, representing God, side by side with God. There's no way they're doing that in their own strength. You don't have to do this in your own strength. Our strength is fragile. The power doesn't come from here. And it doesn't come from here, right? We can't believe our way into who we want to be. If you just believe hard enough, you can be anything you want to be. If you just try hard enough, you can be anything you want to be. No. It doesn't always work. I will never be an astronaut. And I will never be an NFL commentator, although those would be two really cool jobs I would love to have. I can't do it. I would be a really good NFL commentator. I love football, and it would be really good to listen to me just like John Madden. I could circle people, and I'd be like, see here, this is what's happening. Sorry, you don't need to know that. But I can't believe my way into it. I can't just make it happen because I want it to happen. But God says you can do this. You can do miracles. You can move through the river in my strength. In my mighty strength, you can do these things. Joshua 1:6, Joshua 1:7, Joshua 1:9, Joshua 2:11. Like he is just constantly reminding him. Now, if you're kind of I'm less like this. I don't need a plan, but my wife needs a plan. I don't know if you are like this. I have a friend here who's an accountant. They tend to be more like that. They need a plan and a list, and we need to know what's going on, and everything has an order, and everything has a rule, and everything has a place, and right? Or if you've ever worked with a lawyer, they're like, okay, now tick this and sign this 10 times, and you're like, oh my goodness, what is going on? Maybe you're a doer. You're like, I just fix things and this is beyond me. I'm a doer. I need to just get my hands dirty and get in there and know that I can see it's broken. I can replace that. I just need a part and I'll get this. And you know what? I'll even make this part because that's who I am. I do stuff. Just tell me what I got to do. Or tell me what the plan is. Or show me the list. Or make sure it's signed in triplicate. And then this storm comes along, right? And suddenly I can't do what I normally do. And my lists, I'm just crumpling them up and throwing them out and make a new one every other day. I'm exhausted from thinking through what I can do, and it's just gone again. I have some really good friends who are high school teachers. Man, are they ever struggling. Like, I had a plan, but it's gone again, and then they changed the rules on me on Friday, and I'm not sure even it's even going to last till Monday. And there are people that need to have a plan. You know, they follow a plan, and we had a plan, and then you've ruined that plan on me. Because that's how we do it. But I think the key here to finding this mighty strength is just being. Being a human being and not a human doing, right? Like, somehow, this is my purpose somehow. To just be. God's already prepared us for this moment. I'm not saying you need to stop doing your job. Don't hear that. We need people that think through everything. We need people that understand how the law works. We need teachers that have a plan. Otherwise, it's just chaos. But there comes a moment where we just have to be who we are. You're a teacher. Just teach. You're good with numbers. Do the numbers. You're good with your hands. Well, how can you do that when your job's taken away from you? Be creative. You were creative before, be creative again. Find that place of being and lean into God's strength to allow you to do that. All right, my last point is move the kingdom. How do we move the kingdom? When all the people set out from their tents to cross over the Jordan, like all the people, how do we move all the people? Well, the priests crossed first. And they stood in the middle while all Israel went through. I don't know how we're going to do this, but they don't do it alone. It's all the priests go first. I can't carry the ark of God by myself. I need other people on either end of the pole. We are now one body, one people, one spirit that binds us together, that gives us gifts so that we can help each other and we can move together. We pray. When you've done everything and we take our stand, we pray. Pray in the Spirit on all occasions and pray for those that are speaking. It requires us to be vulnerable, to say that I understand your pain and your fear. I understand your weakness. Christ, in Philippians 2, made himself completely humble, just like us, right? It says, humbled and found in the form of a man. And it's amazing because he understands us. We have a high priest. Hebrews says we have a high priest that understands our every need, our every temptation, our every struggle. Yeah, like Jesus gets it. How do we move the kingdom? We move by standing still, by taking a stand, by standing together with God in our center and other priest brothers and sisters on either side of us. We stand in the flood. Will there be battles ahead? Yeah, check. Right? They're not going into a promised land that's just given to them. It's not McDonald's. Like, if we just get through the river, we get McDonald's, that's great. There's a Happy Meal and a toy. It's awesome. No, there's battles ahead. There's hard times. Yep. There's unknown territory, for sure. We're not always hearing from God. It seems like, right? Can you check that? Like, I've been praying, God, and it's just not working out. But we're called to step forth and have faith. We're promised that we can put on the helmet of salvation, that we have righteousness, not of our own. We put on his righteousness, that the gospel gives us firm feet so that we can stand prepared. We have all the promises of God. We can go back to Joshua 1 and remember that God showed up and said, have courage, I'm with you. We can be in God's strength, and we can find his hope in the darkness. And we can step into the chaos and be that light of hope to those around us. Whether it's our brothers and sisters here, or next door, or those that don't know Jesus, or even the enemy we're heading towards, how do we bring the light of Christ into that place? How do we rest in the fact that we've been made to be in this moment? That God knows this moment, and he encourages us to step into the chaos, the flood, to get muddy, to find his might, to see a miracle, and to move forward. Thanks.